Motion. Bennett looks down the middle. McConkey wide open. Touchdown, Dogs.
How is everybody doing today? This is Colin Bashingle here, Bash Ellison in the network of Loudmouth Sports here. I just did a video earlier today. It was a Notre Dame video. You can see the playlist here. I'm tagging it right now in the cards or somewhere around this time point in the cards. So there's the full playlist of the teams I've done, but the one I did most recently is Notre Dame. So make sure you check that out. You can also check out Loudmouth Weekly over on Loudmouth Sports, and Loudmouth CFB is coming up on Wednesday. So make sure you tune in for that, and make sure you like and subscribe to what we have here. And again, if you check out my @ right there on the screen, that is both my TikTok and Twitch. You can come in, put on your post notifications when I go live on Twitch. You can come in, comment what you think. If you ask questions or make comments relative to the team that I am talking about, you will get in the YouTube video for sure. Now, with that being said, just one quick reminder, like and subscribe. And most certainly, I don't have this written here, but comment. Maybe I should add that, because that's probably most important to me, is that you guys comment, because my biggest thing is I am a huge college football fan and I love interacting with college football fans. So make sure you tune into that. But without any sort of delay whatsoever, we are going to talk about players leaving for the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, we are going to talk about key departures specifically to the NFL draft, or who entered the NFL draft. I always look at this, just to be clear, when I talk about key departures. The key departures are more so starters that ended up leaving. That's who I'm going to talk about as far as going on to the next level of football. Not talking about transfers. That's a complete separate players leaving section. But the first part about it is the key departures off to the NFL or their pro football career. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball, and we are going to talk about the wide receiver Marvin Mims, because I feel like that's going to be a huge impact and a shot at this Oklahoma team. We will talk more about that wide receiver room, but I think losing Marvin Mims is a huge deal. You also lose 2 tackles in Anton Harrison and Wanya Morris. Now, Morris a little bit less of a factor there, but losing Anton Harrison's big, and Wanya Morris is still a multi-year starter. He was a really good staple for this team, and that is really hard to replace 2 tackles like that. Not a good recipe, especially for a team who just went 6-7, which we can talk about a little bit if you want to. They also on offense lose running back Eric Gray. I think they're fine at running back. And then tight end, I also have the belief that they're probably going to be fine losing Braden Willis. Now on defense, they only lost Jalen Redmond to the draft process, I guess, because I don't think Jalen Redmond ended up getting drafted, but that's another guy who moved on to the next level, to the professional football ranks. And then Michael Turk, your punter, also moved on for the Oklahoma Sooners. Talking about the transfers that you have coming out of Oklahoma this year, Theo Weiss is going to Missouri, and that's a huge loss for Oklahoma, because I feel like Theo Weiss, though he hasn't been amazing, that's at least a source of comfort that you Oklahoma fans can have. Instead, you might have to end up completely resetting or somewhat resetting what you have at wide receiver. And he's going off to Missouri. That's a big pickup for the Missouri Tigers right there. And I will talk about Missouri here in a little bit. If I don't get any sort of request off of TikTok soon, which I have one extra one other than the 9 that I've already done, I'm going to end up doing Missouri as soon as possible, because I need to tell you guys why I think they're a sleeper team. Quarterback Micah Bowens ended up transferring to Charlotte. That's a second straight team we've talked about with a player transferring to Charlotte. And we know Nick Evers went up to Wisconsin to play in Phil Longo's system. Curious to see how long it takes for him to start up there. Interior offensive lineman, I should say, Marcus Alexander is the other offensive player who transferred to Texas State. Now, this defense struggled a lot this year, specifically at times. They struggled even in wins against Kansas. They struggled against TCU. They struggled against Texas, struggled against Florida State in the bowl game. They had a lot of guys leave, and I'm not sure if Oklahoma's too mad about it. Starting with safety, Bryson Washington, he's off to New Mexico State. Then you have linebacker David Ogwell. Oh my gosh, whoa, I don't even know how to say this. Ugwogbu. I'm Ugwoegbu. That's the only way I'm going to try. He's going to Houston. Again, not an impact transfer, if you ask me, for the Oklahoma Sooners there. Clayton Smith off to Arizona State. Now, this is one of the bigger transfers that they had, I believe. I might actually be wrong about that. I can't remember that, but I definitely think Clayton Smith is going to play at Arizona State regardless. So is Corey Roberson, I should say, defensive lineman going to SMU, and a big-time transfer for Memphis to land Josh Ellison, defensive lineman, also going there, and then defensive lineman Cedric Roberts going on to Texas State. Now, 3 cornerbacks are also transferring: Jaden Davis, Joshua Eaton, and Kendall Dennis. Now, I do think Kendall Dennis at USF was a big pickup for Alex Golish, but only for that level. I think that Oklahoma wants a little bit better play than what Kendall Dennis can bring to the table, but I do think USF definitely got a guy who could potentially start, but that's at a different level of football than what Oklahoma expects for sure. All right, with that being said, we're going to talk about transfers in, and we have an ultimate crime here. Texas to Oklahoma. This is wild. Brennan Thompson. Now, I am pretty high on Brennan Thompson. We'll talk about the wide receiver room in a little bit. That's also going to be joined by Andrel Anthony out of Michigan. Now, he's the one who shined against Michigan State. A lot of Michigan fans tried to say he had his chances and he blew it. I personally do not share that opinion. We'll talk about that a little bit more. 2 tight ends brought in: Blake Smith and a familiar face, Austin Stogner. Smith, of course, from Texas A&M, and Stogner, of course, once from Oklahoma to South Carolina with Spencer Rattler, and now back to Oklahoma. Then you have running back Emeka Megwa over from Washington. Do I think he's going to make an impact on this offense? Not really. Then you have offensive tackle Walter Rouse from Stanford. Could he make an impact? Well, you have a void at the tackle position, and clearly you have a little bit of a void on the interior because you brought in 3 interior offensive linemen: Philip Payee from Utah State. You also have Troy Everett coming in from App State, who I think could potentially play, and then Caleb Schaefer as well from Miami, Ohio. And you brought in a punter to replace your punter that left, Michael Turk. It's Luke Elzinga from Central Michigan. So let's talk about this roster that Oklahoma brings into the 2023 season. They're definitely a mixed bag, mixed feelings. First off, the one thing that makes me a little bit more confident in Oklahoma is the fact that, no offense to Davis Belleville, but they are not going to go to disaster mode if Dylan Gabriel ends up getting hurt, which none of us hoped for that to happen. But that happened last year, and Davis Belleville came in, and he was not very good. So what ended up happening here in the offseason that would make it better? You pick up 5-star Jackson Arnold, who I think is probably the best quarterback in this class. He's Arch Manning, yeah, whatever. Malachi Nelson might give him a run for his money. I think Jackson Arnold, though, out of the tape I watch, is the best quarterback from the class, and I think he's at least the most college ready. Let's say that. Does he turn out to be the best from the class? I don't know, but he's definitely the most college ready, if you ask me, and he does not have to play immediately. Now, talking about the running back room, I think they are just fine. Marcus Major is going to be back for a 5th year. He's definitely going to get some playing time, but a lot of Oklahoma fans are hyped up about Gavin Sawchuk, and the one I've been hyped up about for the last 2 years. He flashed a little bit. He didn't make the freshman impact that I expected him to make, though. I said Nick Singleton and this kid would end up rushing for 1,000 yards. Nick Singleton did, but not Javonte Barnes. I do think Javonte Barnes is going to be the starter. Wouldn't be surprised, though, with between those 3 if they have a lot of split carries. But I do expect that if this offensive line can piece together, they will be more of a run-first team. Because let's talk about their wide receiver room a little bit. You have a slot receiver in Drake Stoops. He's got a certain ceiling. I think Gavin Freeman could potentially help that ceiling. They also brought DJ Graham over from the defensive backfield. Remember that sick one-handed catch? That was actually probably the worst sick catch that we've seen, because it was like 4th and 18, and he ended up catching it, pinning his own team inside the 10 a couple years ago against Nebraska. That was DJ Graham, who's now going from corner over to the wide receiver room. And then you have Jaquez Petaway coming in as a freshman. Does he make an impact? I'm not sure. You have Brennan Thompson transferring in, like I mentioned, from Texas. He is an absolute speedster. Texas fans were raving about him last year. Now they're going to talk about how much he sucks. It's going to be hilarious, because if you pull up their post this time last year. They said Brennan Thompson was going to be an 800-yard wide receiver as a true freshman last year. It is what it is. Andrel Anthony, Jaleel Farouk, definitely projected to be the starters, and I feel like Andrel Anthony is in a decent system to fix his sort of issues. And I think the problem I see with Michigan's offense is just they turn really good receivers into just average third-day picks. And I look at Donovan Peoples-Jones and Nico Collins as examples of this. I don't know why I drew a blank on Collins, but nonetheless, Nico Collins and DPJ are two examples of what can happen. And then I saw Andrel Anthony's career play out, and I kept asking Tyler over there. And look, Michigan's not doing anything wrong because they're winning football games. This is not a shot at Michigan. But if you're a wide receiver, why would you want to be at Michigan over a place like Oklahoma and Jeff Lebby's system after you saw even how Marvin Mims was able to somewhat do last year in a struggling team, a struggling offense pieced together? Jaleel Farouk, definitely the security blanket here, along with Drake Stoops, I guess. But Jaleel Farouk is a guy who really needs to take that step forward. LV Bunkley Shelton is also a guy who needs to take a step forward in year 2 of this system. Overall, though, I do think that this tight end room is what's going to help them. Bringing Austin Stogner back, getting Caden Helms, who I think could make an impact here in his second year in the program, and then Blake Smith. Definitely 3 big-time players that they have there that can help drastically in the pass game, but they also need to find a good blocker at tight end. We'll see how that all plays out. Projecting on the offensive line is going to be an interesting situation. The left tackle, which is, of course, the money position in the offensive line, Walter Rouse, who we talked about earlier, he comes in from Stanford. He's projected to start. McCade Matower is supposed to start next to him at guard. And then the center, Andrew Raum, is back. And, hey, that's at least a security blanket that you have with the senior. And then Caleb Schaefer that we talked about earlier, Tyler Guyton, supposed to start at right tackle. I'm personally not loving this offensive line right now, and it gives me a lot of concern for Oklahoma. We'll talk about their schedule, though. I think they have time to figure it out, but the question is this something that can be figured out by the time they hit Red River rivalry? By the time they have to play at Kansas, at Oklahoma State for the final time in the Big 12, and many other games that are going to come up. I'm definitely going to be interested to see that about this offense. How much improved is this defense going to be? That is the big question that we are going to be asking. Jordan Kelly, Isaiah Coe, they're going to be manning the middle on this defensive line. Ethan Downs and Rondell Bothroyd are going to be the guys on the edges. Now, Rondell Bothroyd, he's interesting to me because I don't necessarily know if he's a guy that's going to make the sort of impact that he probably needs to make. He's a bigger guy. He transferred in a couple years ago from Wake Forest, but he's a bigger guy. But the biggest thing that I want to highlight here is how do they do with Jacob Lacey coming in from from Notre Dame. And actually, I'm not even sure if I got to these transfers on defense because I ended up putting them in a different sheet. So just to be clear, here's the transfers on defense. Reggie Pearson Jr. from Texas Tech, Rondell Bothroyd from Wake Forest. Then you have Trace Ford from Oklahoma State, which is another massive crime. Dasan McCullough from Indiana. And then you have Dejon Terry from Tennessee, Devon Sears, he's coming in from Texas State, and Jacob Lacey. I do think Jacob Lacey is going to push for some playing time, especially if Rondell Bothroyd is not that guy, but I definitely think that they patched up where they needed to. I mentioned Dasan McCullough. That was a massive pickup. I think he's a star. I truly do. And Oklahoma had a guy like that with Kenneth Murray. The difference is, no offense to Alex Grinch, he's still employed at USC. I don't think he's a bad coach, but Alex Grinch, he is no Brent Venables. So when you talk about this type of star, this dynamic athlete named Dasan McCullough, it's very fun to see here. All right, talking about the secondary, the cornerback room is going to be interesting, but it does bring you a little bit of like Well, we let DJ Graham switch to the other side of the ball, so we got to be somewhat comfortable with Woody Washington. I also feel like we are going to find out that Gentry Williams is an absolute stud, and I think that's part of the reason why they could make that move. Connie Walker and Kendall Dolby also going to fill some depth there. You have Billy Bowman and Reggie Pearson projected to start at safety. I talked about Pearson already, the transfer from Texas Tech. I think he's a really, really good player. And a guy I definitely know is a really good player is true freshman Peyton Bowen, who I think is going to play. That recruitment was very interesting, but he ends up coming in here. I think he's got the tools to be able in play immediately. Is he going to start? No, he's got to put on a little bit of weight. He's got to get a little bit bigger. But overall, with his frame, he's not small. He's athletic. He is dynamic. He could definitely play as a true freshman. I think this defense will be improved. Is it going to be a significant improvement? Not sure. Do they need it? I'm not sure because their schedule is not nearly as tough as it was last year. So breakout stars that I can see for this Oklahoma roster, Javante Barnes is a guy I've been high on, and I think he still has the tools to do it. Don't disappoint me, Javante. I think this is your year at running back. Wide receiver Brennan Thompson. I bring him up because he's got that track speed. I think in this Jeff Lebby offense, I think he could very easily make some big-time plays in some big-time moments for the Oklahoma Sooners, especially if they're going to get back into the Big 12 contention and in that race for the championship. Linebacker Dasan McCullough, look, most of you guys probably know about him, especially if you're watching this video. But if you don't know about Dasan McCullough, he's an absolute freak show. He went to Indiana last year. He was the bright spot of their entire team on both sides of the ball. He was absolutely amazing. Dasan McCullough is a true stud. He's a 5-star in my book. I think this was a massive get for the Oklahoma Sooners. And I also think Gentry Williams is probably going to be a pretty good player. He's young, he's raw, but he's got all the physical tools. And we'll see if his technique in year 2 in this Brent Venables system and his ability to understand what Brent Venables wants to do, if that's there, he's going to be a really good player in my opinion. All right, let's get straight to this schedule prediction, and let's get you out of here. You see their non-conference, and this is what I'm talking about. No shot. SMU is going to be a good team. Now, Arkansas State, not so much. Butch Jones is not going to have much success out there in Norman. I'm not going to spend too much time on that game. Arkansas State's kind of a mess. They're somewhat rebuilding, but at the same time, they have like the most composite talent in the Sun Belt. I don't know what's going on over there, but I don't think Oklahoma should have a problem week 1. SMU could present them with some problems, kind of transfer portal U. I think their defense is going to be pretty solid. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Rhett Lashley's, but that was as a coordinator. As a head coach, he might be a lot better. They're 2 completely different jobs, and Preston Stone can absolutely sling that rock. He plays the system better than Tanner Mordecai, by the way, Wisconsin fans and people high on Wisconsin. But I do think the Oklahoma talent will overwhelm that SMU, and I think that the Oklahoma Sooners will beat the SMU Mustangs. At Tulsa, year 1 of Kevin Wilson, I think they're going to be better, but not nearly better enough to where they can beat the Oklahoma Sooners. They start out 3-0 with the out-of-conference slate that they have. And again, you can see why I think that their offensive line has potential to get things together, because their first conference game is at Cincinnati. That's a far travel. That's tough. But I don't think Cincinnati's all that good, and they wouldn't have really had to stress too much, if you ask me. Maybe SMU makes them panic for a little bit because they're a decent team, but I just don't see it with Cincinnati this year, and I think Oklahoma is going to be able to give them basically a butt whooping in this game, even in Nippert Stadium, traveling halfway across the country. Now, this game's going to be dangerous. I think Iowa State is going to be a pretty solid team. But again, I think Oklahoma understands that we can't look ahead to Texas because it's the top 2 teams in the entire conference that makes the conference championship. We cannot make everything about that Texas game. but I think their mentality is a loser's mentality against Texas. And I think Texas is a better team. I can't wait to talk about this Texas team because I'm not saying they're back. No, don't even expect me to say Texas is back. Okay. I'm not going down that path. They beat the crap out of Oklahoma last year. Quinn Ewers going into a second year in the Steve Sarkisian system should take a jump, especially getting Isaiah Nair back, bringing in A.D. Mitchell, having Xavier Worthy back for another year, having the weapons that he has at his disposal, and the offensive line that's going to be far better this year than they were last year at that point in the season, and they were still able to goose egg Oklahoma. I get what Davis Belleville, whatever you want to say, but I do think that Texas wins that game. So you go into the bye. It's not the end of the world. I know you lost to your rivals at the Texas State Fair. 5-1 is not the worst thing in the world. You beat UCF at home. But Kansas gives you problems on defense. And this is where the questions on defense rear its ugly head. And this is where the maybe lack of wide receiver explosiveness rears its ugly head. I think this Kansas team returns a lot. I think they're going to be better than last year. And they were a tough out last year. I get Oklahoma won that game last year in Norman, but Oklahoma's also going to be better. I think this is a close one, but I think the Kansas Jayhawks take down the Oklahoma Sooners. And look, this isn't a joke. I picked Duke to beat Notre Dame, and I picked Kansas to beat Oklahoma. Guess what, guys? Things have changed in the year 2023. This is not 2019. This is not 2021. Those two teams are getting better. They're on the rise. Kansas, right now, Lance Leipold, he has a good system with a great team coming back. Most of his team coming back. That was a pretty tough team to go up against for most teams last year anyway. At Oklahoma State, the final edition of this in Boone Pickens, at least for the foreseeable future. Before Oklahoma moves to the SEC, I do think Oklahoma does get the last laugh. But listen, Oklahoma State, especially if Oklahoma comes in with a big head, a big ego about themselves, this game could be really, really tough because Oklahoma State is going to be playing better at the end of the year, and they could be a bowl team. They have a chance to play spoiler to their arch rival here. You cannot take them lightly. I don't think they do. I think Brent Venables understands the game. I think they win that game. And I think they walk through the worst team in the Big 12 by far. I get you might want to talk about Houston's mess, Cincinnati coming in. West Virginia is the worst team out of all of them. At BYU, this one is really, really tough. I would not be the least bit surprised if Oklahoma goes on the road to Provo and loses that game. They're going to be physical, but I don't think they're going to be able to be dynamic enough to keep up with Oklahoma's offense on that side of the ball. And Oklahoma might not have to do much, but if they drop 30 points at BYU, I think that might be enough. But you got to watch out. Lavelle Edwards Stadium is a really, really tough place to play. Provo is a very tough place to play. And if that game turns into a night game in Provo, oh man, don't catch me not possibly considering picking BYU in that game. But I'm going with Oklahoma. Final game, TCU. And for all we know, and I have not predicted TCU yet, I still don't really know what I'm going to have for the record, but I definitely think TCU is going to be a pretty solid team. Again, people forget Chandler Morris beat out Max Duggan for the starting job at the beginning of the season last year. They bring in a ton of transfers. They're doing very well in recruiting. I think Oklahoma wins this game. I think they get revenge for the embarrassment that they had last year in Fort Worth. But with that being said, don't sleep on TCU either. Like, here's the thing about this Oklahoma schedule. I have them going 10-2. This is so manageable. But if Oklahoma underperforms the way they underperformed last year, that 10-2 that I gave them this year, and that was the most I was going to give them, could easily be 7-5 with one of those 5 losses being an embarrassing loss to SMU or being an embarrassing loss to Tulsa. You don't want that to happen if you're an Oklahoma fan. I'm not predicting that to happen, but I definitely cannot go anywhere over 10-2 for the Oklahoma Sooners. So that's where I'm going to go with this 10-2, 7-2 in the Big 12. And hey, depending on how tiebreakers work out, with your one loss being to Kansas, we still have to preview Kansas. Your one other loss other than Texas. We can all admit that we all think that Texas should be, keyword should, be a contender here in 2023. Kansas, are they going to be in the mix? Are they going to be taken seriously in the mix? Or are they just going to be a team that's going to cause problems and disruption at the top of the standings, but still is going to have 4 or 5 losses in conference? You got to wait until these previews come out, because Tyler and I are busting them out. And I'm personally going to be continuing this rally cry all the way down. All 76 videos is the total that we had calculated. So you guys need to make sure that you like, subscribe, and comment for sure what you think they're going to do. Listen, my opinion is not sacred. The stuff I know about the roster is not perfect, right? So I want to hear from you. I want you to interact so I can gain something from you. And hey, if we have some discussion to be had, I'm willing to debate here. My opinion, like I said, not sacred. It's not the end all be all. So I want to hear what you guys have to say. So, hey, if you like conversation, if you like having a say, then make sure you like and subscribe and check out my Twitch so you can ask questions during the video. In case I missed something too, you can say, hey, by the way, this is a mistake you made. Hey, by the way, this is something you missed. Do that. I would love that. So with that being said, I thank you guys for tuning in here. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your night. We will see you guys next time here on Loudmouth Sports Network.